I didn't plan on spending my Saturday afternoon fixing someone's internet. I had a quiet weekend ahead with my wife, Emma. We had planned to enjoy a nice dinner, possibly catch a movie, and just relax without any interruptions. But then my phone rang. I looked at the screen and saw Lily's name flashing. Lily, my 20-year-old neighbor. We'd exchanged a few friendly greetings here and there, mostly when we bumped into each other outside or when she had a question about something. We didn't really know each other well, so I didn't think her call would be anything serious. But when I answered, I could tell something was on her mind. "Hey, Jason." Her voice came through a little nervous, but still trying to sound upbeat. "I hate to bother you, but my internet's been acting up and I've tried everything I can think of. I know you're good with tech stuff. Could you come over and check it out? I'd really appreciate it." I glanced at Emma, who was sitting on the couch flipping through a magazine. I knew she wouldn't mind me helping Lily, but I still had to decide whether I was willing to give up the time I had set aside for us. "Sure, no problem," I said, smiling. "I'll be over in about 20 minutes. I hung up and Emma looked up from her magazine, noticing the brief pause. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I replied with a smile. "Just need to help Lily with her internet for a bit." Emma nodded and returned to her magazine without much fuss. She knew I'd always help out neighbors when needed. I grabbed my jacket and walked next door to Lily's apartment. It wasn't far, just a short jog across the small courtyard. As I approached her door, I could hear faint music from inside, so I knocked softly. Lily opened the door almost immediately, her face lighting up when she saw me. Her dark brown hair framed her face, and there was a warm, welcoming energy about her, even though I knew she was a bit shy. "Hey, Jason," she greeted with a smile, stepping back to let me in. "Thanks for coming over so quickly." "No problem at all," I said as I stepped inside. "Let's see what we've got here." I immediately noticed her living room was cozy, with soft lighting and a few plants scattered around the space. She wasn't exactly messy, but it was clear she was still getting settled. "Where's the router?" I asked, looking around. She pointed to the corner of the room. "It's over there," she said, walking over and bending down to plug something into the socket. As I knelt beside her, I felt a little odd. This wasn't something I usually did, especially with someone much younger than me. She was attractive, sure, but I was married. Still, the situation made me feel uncomfortable. Lily, however, seemed aware of the tension, but didn't say anything about it at first. As I started troubleshooting, she hovered close by, her movements a little more than casual. "So," she suddenly said, breaking the silence. "I've been thinking. I've been here for a while and I really don't know many people in the neighborhood." She paused and smiled a little. "I mean, I know you're married, but I can't help but think you're exactly the kind of guy I'd want around here. You know, strong, reliable." I straightened up from the router and looked at her, unsure of how to respond. My gut told me something was off, but she just kept smiling. "I don't know, Jason," she continued, her tone light, but there was something else in her eyes. "I've been pretty lonely here, and I thought maybe we could hang out sometime. Not like anything weird, just, I don't know, like friends, I guess. I'm just looking for someone to talk to." I could feel the situation getting more complicated by the second. My mind was racing. She was young, attractive, and clearly lonely, but I was married. This wasn't a situation I had ever expected to find myself in. She must have sensed my hesitation, because her smile softened and she quickly added, "I know you're married, Jason." "I totally respect that. Well, I don't know. I guess I've been thinking a lot about things and I really admire you." I was stuck in an awkward spot. I didn't want to hurt her feelings, but I knew I had to be careful. "Look, Lily," I began, my voice steady but unsure. "I'm happy to help you out, but I've got a wife and I can't really be hanging out in ways that could be misinterpreted." Lily nodded, though a slight disappointment flickered in her eyes. "I understand," she said softly. "I just thought maybe you could be someone I could rely on. You know, it's hard being on my own sometimes." I finished fixing the internet and packed up my things, feeling like I needed to leave. The conversation had made me uneasy, and I couldn't help but think about what Lily had said. I didn't know if it was a cry for attention or if she genuinely thought I was someone she could lean on, but I couldn't let myself get too involved. As I left, Lily thanked me again, and I promised to check in with her next time she needed help. But the strange tension between us hung in the air, and I wasn't sure how to handle what had just happened. When I got back home, Emma was still on the couch, her magazine now forgotten. Everything good? She asked. Yeah, I said, trying to sound normal. Just had to help with some stuff. Nothing major. But something in me felt unsettled. Something about that visit had left me feeling unsure. The next few days flew by, and Emma and I kept our usual routine. The tension from my visit to Lily's apartment lingered, but I did my best to push it to the back of my mind. I had a job, a wife, responsibilities, things I needed to focus on. But every time I saw Lily in the hallway or exchanged brief hellos, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right between us. She seemed different now, a little more intense, like there was something more she wanted to say but was holding back. It wasn't until a few days later, on a Thursday afternoon, that Lily called again. This time, the conversation was even more unexpected. Hey, Jason. Her voice came through on the phone, soft and hesitant. I know you're probably busy, but could you come over again? I've been having some other issues with the internet, and I'm just not sure what's going on. I'd really appreciate it if you could take another look. I hesitated for a moment. The last thing I wanted was another awkward encounter, but I also didn't want to leave her hanging. I couldn't just ignore her. She was my neighbor after all. Still, the thought of walking into that apartment again, after everything that had happened last time, didn't sit well with me. Sure, I said, trying to sound casual. I'll be over in about 15 minutes. I hung up the phone, not entirely sure how to feel. As I walked to Lily's apartment, I mentally prepared myself for whatever was coming next. I couldn't let myself get caught up in anything that could be misinterpreted. I had a good life with Emma, and that was where my focus needed to be. But as I knocked on Lily's door again, I couldn't deny the tension building in my chest. When Lily opened the door, she was dressed in a simple tank top and shorts, but the outfit was surprisingly flattering. Her smile was warm, yet there was something more intense in her eyes now. Something that made me feel a little uncomfortable. Hey, Jason, she said, stepping aside to let me in. Thanks for coming over again. I really appreciate it. I nodded, trying to ignore the way my pulse quickened. No problem. Let's take a look at your internet. She led me into the living room, where I immediately noticed a subtle change. The atmosphere felt different than the last time I'd been there. The lighting was softer, and there were candles lit in the corner of the room, almost as if she was setting the stage for something. I glanced at the router, then back at her. You mentioned the internet was acting up again, I said. Yeah, she replied, her voice quiet. It's still not working right, but, I think it might just be the way it's set up. I nodded and got to work on the router again, but this time Lily didn't leave me to it. She stayed right by my side, watching closely as I fiddled with the wires and settings. Thanks for always helping me out, Jason, she said after a few moments of silence, her voice soft but meaningful. You know, I don't have many people to talk to around here. It's been hard living alone. I looked up at her, feeling the weight of her words. I get it, I said, my voice a little more serious now. Being on your own can be tough sometimes, but you've got to find ways to stay busy, keep your mind occupied. She smiled at me, but there was something more to it than just appreciation. Yeah, she said slowly. I guess, but sometimes I just wish I had someone to talk to, someone to spend time with. I mean, I see how you and Emma are together, and it just seems like, it'd be nice to have something like that. Someone who really gets me. I wasn't sure how to respond to that. It felt like she was crossing a line, or maybe I was just overthinking it. She was young, attractive, and seemed to want more from me than just friendly conversation. Look, Lily, I said, trying to keep things light. I know it's tough, but you've got a lot of potential. You're smart, funny, and you'll meet someone who's right for you. It just takes time. She tilted her head, looking at me with an intensity I hadn't seen before. I don't know, Jason, she said softly. I think you're exactly the kind of person I need right now. I felt a knot form in my stomach, my mind racing, trying to process what she was saying. Was she flirting with me? Did she think I was available in some way? I wasn't sure, but something about the way she said it made me uneasy. You're married, Jason, she continued, her tone shifting. I know that, but that doesn't change the way I feel. I think you're amazing. And it's hard to be around someone like you and not feel something more. I didn't know what to say. I was completely caught off guard. Lily, I'm flattered, but I'm married. I can't. I don't want to cross any lines here. Her expression softened and she stepped a little closer to me. I understand, Jason, she whispered. I don't want to make things awkward. I just wanted you to know. The weight of her words hit me harder than I anticipated. It wasn't just loneliness. She was clearly confused and maybe even searching for something more. But I couldn't be the one to offer that. I had a life with Emma, and I wasn't willing to jeopardize it over a brief lapse in judgment. I finished fixing the internet, and we stood in silence for a moment. Lily's gaze remained fixed on me, but I could tell she was processing everything as well. The air between us was thick with unspoken tension, something neither of us had expected. Thanks again for your help, Jason, she said finally, her voice carrying a hint of sadness. I guess I'll have to handle things on my own. I nodded and gave her a tight smile. No problem. If you need anything, just let me know. As I walked out of her apartment, I felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. I knew I'd done the right thing, but part of me felt like I hadn't handled it the best way possible. The situation had become more complicated than I was prepared for. When I returned home, Emma was at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. How did it go? She asked, looking up at me. Good, I replied, forcing a smile. Had to reset the router again. It's all fixed now. But I couldn't shake the feeling that things weren't truly fixed with Lily. The next few days passed quickly. I tried my best to stay focused on Emma and our life together. But Lily's words and the way she looked at me lingered in my mind. Every time I crossed paths with her in the hallway or received a message about something else breaking in her apartment, I couldn't ignore the unspoken tension between us. I felt the pull, the attraction, but I also knew I had a responsibility to Emma. One night, as Emma and I sat at the kitchen table, I found myself lost in thought. I hadn't intended for any of this to become so complicated. Lily was just a neighbor I'd been helping, but now things were getting tangled. I could feel myself being drawn to her, and it scared me because I knew what that might lead to. Jason, are you listening? Emma's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. I blinked and looked up, realizing I hadn't heard a word she'd said. Emma was staring at me, concerned. Sorry, babe, I said, forcing a smile. Just had a lot on my mind. She sighed and set her phone down. You've been acting distant lately. Is everything okay? I didn't want to lie to her, but I didn't want to tell her the truth either. That Lily had come on to me, and I was conflicted about it. So I chose to remain silent and avoid the question. Yeah, I finally answered. Everything's fine. Emma didn't seem convinced, but didn't push the issue further. She simply stood up, kissed me on the cheek, and said, I'm going to bed. You coming? I nodded, forcing another smile. Yeah, in a minute. But as I watched her leave the room, the nagging feeling in my gut returned. I had lied to her. I wasn't fine. I wasn't close to being fine. I was tangled up in something I didn't know how to escape from. The next day, I received a message from Lily. It was simple. Hey, Jason. I was wondering if you had some time later. I could really use your help with something. It wasn't unusual for Lily to text me about small issues around the apartment, but this time it felt different. I knew I shouldn't go over again. I knew I needed to set boundaries, but I also knew I would go. I couldn't stop myself. I quickly typed a response. Sure, I'll be over in about 20 minutes. When I arrived at her apartment, the door was already open, and she was waiting for me inside. There was no small talk, no pleasantries. She simply motioned for me to follow her into the living room, where a glass of wine sat on the coffee table. You're early, she said, a teasing smile on her face. I figured I'd get here before it gets too late, I replied, trying to keep it casual. But the moment I entered her apartment, I could sense the change in the air. Everything felt different, like something had shifted. Lily was standing near the couch, watching me with those intense eyes. I hope you don't mind me being a little forward, Jason, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I frowned, confused. What do you mean? She took a deep breath and walked over to the couch, sitting down. She patted the space next to her. I wanted to tell you something. I've been thinking about it for a while now, and I can't keep it to myself anymore. I hesitated, then sat down beside her. The tension between us felt unbearable. Lily, if this is about the internet, I fixed it. You don't need to worry about it anymore. She shook her head, her gaze unwavering. No, Jason, it's not about the internet. She paused, then looked down at her hands, gathering her thoughts. I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been feeling really alone lately. I haven't had anyone to talk to, and honestly, I've been feeling a little lost. I didn't know how to respond. I had heard her complain about being lonely before, but it felt different this time. More vulnerable, more real. I don't know what it is about you, Jason, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. But there's something about you that makes me feel seen, like you understand me. And I think I've developed feelings for you. I froze. My heart raced and my thoughts scattered. Lily, I said, my voice strained. I'm married. I can't do this. She nodded slowly, her expression softening. I know, she said quietly. I know. And I'm not asking you to leave Emma. I needed you to know how I feel. I've been carrying this around for a while now, and it's getting harder to ignore. I looked at her, trying to process everything she had just said. She was young, confused, and clearly struggling with feelings she didn't know how to handle. But I didn't know how to help her without crossing a line. The temptation was there, but so was my commitment to Emma. I don't know what to say, I whispered, barely audible. I never meant to lead you on. I've always just been helping you out because you're my neighbor. That's it. She sighed, her shoulders slumping. I get it. I really do. I just thought maybe you might feel the same way. I don't, I said firmly, more decisively than I expected. I don't feel the same way. I'm committed to Emma. I can't do this. For a long moment, Lily didn't say anything. She just looked at me as if searching for something, maybe a sign that I felt differently. But there was nothing there. Finally, she stood up. I'm sorry, Jason, she said, her voice steady but quiet. I shouldn't have put you in this position. I stood up too, unsure of what else to do. It's okay, I said, though it didn't feel that way at all. I just think we need some space to figure things out. Lily nodded, her face hardening slightly. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I turned to leave, but before I reached the door, she spoke again. Thank you, Jason, for being honest with me. I won't bother you again. As I stepped out of her apartment and into the hallway, I felt a weight lift off my chest. But it was quickly replaced by guilt. I knew I hadn't handled things as well as I could have. I had drawn the line, but it had taken too long to get there. When I got home, Emma was already in bed. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her sleep. She looked so peaceful, unaware of the turmoil I had just experienced. I didn't know how I could make things right, but I had to try. The days that followed felt like a blur. I tried to act normal, to get back to the routine with Emma, but there was a tension hanging over everything. The conversations with Lily had left me unsettled, and every time I saw her around the building, I felt that strange pull again. I didn't know how to move forward. I had set boundaries, but part of me wondered if it was already too late. Emma and I hadn't talked about it, and I didn't know how to bring it up without hurting her or admitting that I had gotten involved in something I never should have allowed. I had made it clear to Lily that nothing could happen between us, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't convinced. I wasn't sure where her feelings ended and where her desire to get more out of our interactions began. I was sitting on the couch, trying to focus on my work, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Lily. Hey, Jason. I know things are a little weird between us, but I just wanted to check in. I hope you're doing okay. If you ever want to talk. I found myself staring at the message, reading it over and over, trying to understand its meaning. There was nothing overtly inappropriate about it. She was simply checking in. But it felt like more than that. Like she was testing the waters once again. Testing me. I let out a deep sigh, feeling torn. I had already set boundaries, but this message felt like it was pulling me back into something I shouldn't be involved with. After some thought, I decided to reply, aiming to remain respectful yet firm. Thanks, Lily. I'm doing fine. I appreciate your message, but I think it's best to keep things simple. I'm married and need to focus on that. I sent the message, but immediately a knot tightened in my stomach. I knew I had done the right thing, but I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt. It felt like I was letting her down, and that thought weighed heavily on me. But I had to stay focused. Emma was the person I had committed to, and I couldn't risk everything for a moment of weakness. A few hours later, Emma came home from work. She entered the living room, a tired smile on her face, and dropped her purse onto the table. "Hey, babe," she said, sitting beside me on the couch. "How was your day?" "Same old," I replied, trying to sound casual. "How about yours?" She shrugged, clearly exhausted. "Busy, you know how it is, but I'm glad to be home." She leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. "I missed you today," I smiled, wrapping my arm around her. "I missed you too." But even as I held her, I couldn't shake the thoughts of Lily. Her gaze, the way she confessed her feelings. It all felt overwhelming. The more I tried to push it out of my mind, the more it crept in. "Jason." Emma's voice interrupted my thoughts. She pulled back slightly, looking at me with concern. "You've been distant lately. Is something going on?" I hesitated. I knew I should be honest with her, but the words were stuck. I couldn't tell her about Lily, about the growing complications. "It's nothing," I finally said, forcing a smile. "Just work stuff, you know." She studied my face for a moment as if searching for the truth, but then nodded. "Okay, if you need to talk, I'm here." A pang of guilt hit my chest. I should have been open with her, but I didn't know how to explain something I didn't fully understand myself. As the days went by, the tension between Emma and me grew. I tried to be more present, to show her that I was there, but my thoughts kept returning to Lily. She hadn't texted since our last conversation, but I couldn't help wondering if she was waiting for me to make the next move. Then, one night, the temptation became too strong. I had just finished dinner with Emma, and she had gone to bed early. I was sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone when I saw Lily's name appear on the screen. My heart skipped a beat. "Hey, Jason. I know this might be a lot, but I was wondering if you'd like to grab coffee sometime, just to talk." It seemed innocent enough, a casual invitation, but I knew it meant more. And yet, part of me couldn't resist. I stared at the message for a long time, my finger hovering over the screen. I knew I shouldn't reply. I should ignore it and move on. But something about the way she reached out, the way she made me feel, made it hard to let go. I took a deep breath and put my phone down, telling myself not to respond. I had to focus on Emma, on our future. I had to stay true to my commitment. But just as I made that decision, the phone buzzed again. A new message from Lily. "I understand if you're not interested. I just thought it would be nice to talk. No pressure, I promise." I closed my eyes, running a hand through my hair. The weight of the situation felt overwhelming, like a storm cloud hovering over me. This wasn't about coffee. It was about something deeper, something I didn't know how to deal with. I picked up my phone and with trembling fingers typed a reply. "Lily, I'm married. I'm committed to my wife. I can't do this." I hit send, almost immediately regretting the harshness of the words, but they needed to be said. There was a long pause before her response came through. "I understand, Jason. I won't bother you again." Her message was a relief, but it also left an ache in my chest. I had made the right choice, but the weight of the decision still lingered. Sitting there in the silence, I realized how much I had allowed things to spiral out of control. It wasn't just about Lily anymore. It was about me, my choices, and the future I was building with Emma. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. The tension between me and Lily was something that couldn't be easily erased. It would linger, and I wasn't sure how long I could keep it at bay. The weight of the past few weeks had settled heavily on my shoulders, like a storm cloud that wouldn't go away. The tension between Emma and me was thick. Even though I tried to bury it beneath the surface, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't just the unresolved feelings with Lily. It was the fact that I had been dishonest with Emma. Even if I hadn't acted on the temptation, I hadn't been completely truthful. I hadn't heard from Lily since our last exchange, and part of me was relieved by the silence. But another part of me felt lost. I had pushed her away, but I hadn't fully confronted the emotions that had come up during our brief interactions. I was still trying to understand the impact it had all had on me. One Friday evening, Emma and I decided to go out for dinner. She'd been so patient with me, so understanding as I tried to return to normal. I was doing my best to be the husband she deserved, but it wasn't easy. I knew there were things I needed to work through, but I didn't want to burden her with the turmoil inside my head. We sat at a cozy corner booth, the soft hum of conversation surrounding us and the flickering candlelight casting shadows on the table. Emma smiled at me across the table, her eyes full of love, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. She was everything I needed, everything I wanted. Yet the temptation had been there, and I couldn't deny that it had affected me. She spoke gently. "How's work been?" "You seem a little off lately." I paused, searching for the right words. She was right. I had been distracted, torn between the life I had with her and the mess that had clouded my thoughts. "It's fine," I said, trying to keep things light. "Just a lot going on." "You know how it is." She raised an eyebrow, her concern evident. "You're not telling me everything, Jason. I can tell." I felt my heart race. She was so perceptive. "I'm sorry," I muttered, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I've just been in my head a lot." "It's nothing to do with you." Emma squeezed my hand, her thumb brushing over my knuckles. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right?" I nodded, feeling the lump in my throat tighten. I wanted to tell her everything. But how could I? How could I explain that a woman half my age had made me question everything I thought I knew about myself? How could I admit that I had let myself entertain those thoughts, even if they were fleeting? "Yeah," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "I know." We talked more about our day, the conversation shifting to lighter topics, but the tension was still there. I was relieved that she hadn't pushed me further, but at the same time, it felt like a lie. The truth was festering inside me, and I couldn't keep it locked away forever. Later that night, as I lay in bed beside Emma, sleep wouldn't come. I could hear her soft breathing, peaceful and steady, but my mind wouldn't quiet. I kept thinking about Lily, how young, beautiful, and free-spirited she was. How, in that moment when she looked at me with longing eyes, I had felt something I hadn't felt in years. A spark of connection. But it wasn't real. It couldn't be. I had a life, a future, and a wife who loved me. Still, the questions lingered. Could I ever truly forget what had happened? Could I go back to the way things were before? The next morning, I woke up before Emma. My thoughts swirled in the quiet stillness of the house. I knew what I had to do. I needed to confront this once and for all. I couldn't let it eat away at me anymore. I grabbed my phone, feeling the familiar knot in my stomach. I opened my messages and found Lily's name. Her last message still sitting there. "I understand, Jason. I won't bother you again." I hesitated, then typed out a response. "Lily, I've been thinking a lot about everything. I need to be clear. I'm married and I love my wife. I can't keep this going, even in my thoughts. Please respect that it's over." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The weight of the decision felt heavy on my chest. I didn't want to hurt her, but I knew I had to do this. It wasn't fair to Emma, and it wasn't fair to anyone. I put my phone down, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief. I had made the right choice. I had cut off the temptation and fully committed to the life I had. It was going to be hard, but it was the only way forward. As I sat reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized just how much Emma meant to me. She was the one who had always been there, the one I had built my life with. I had to stop looking back at the past and focus on the future. I could do this. I would do this. The road ahead might not be easy, but it would be worth it.